extreme variations in the image it projects. What we perceive is not just a passive photograph of reality, but an active construction of reality. We tend to see what we expect to see. We see things with our minds as well as our eyes. We are constantly selecting only a small part of the available sensory information to attend to and process. One of the ways we perceive something actively is by taking into account its context. This context can even determine the nature of the perception itself, with the same object looking very different in different contexts. Take a look at this square. Notice how the square appears to get darker as the background becomes lighter, or in other words, as the context changes. Now take a look at these three men. We see the figure on the right as smaller than the one on the left in back, because we unconsciously compare him with the large figure. But in fact, the two small figures are exactly the same size. To be effective, perception also has to work fast and extract the minimal amount of information necessary to form an impression of the entire pattern. Visual perception would be far too slow if we had to wait to experience every last piece of something. Edges and boundaries in particular convey lots of information about an object. They provide a visual shortcut which can help the brain fill in the whole pattern from the fewest identifying parts. Sometimes the brain will even register a pattern that doesn't exist. These phantom patterns are called subjective contours. A boundary or an edge can powerfully influence the way we see things. In this example, the left half of the screen appears darker than the right half. But watch what happens when we cover up the boundary. What happened is this. Your brain detected a slight difference in brightness in the center, and then went overboard in extending that difference to the rest of the surface. Given the complexity of the world we try to understand, and the complexity of our minds, it's small wonder that what we perceive as out there is subject to a great number of influences, some of which will lead us astray. We may see something that isn't there because it's what we expect to see. Or conversely, we may not see something because we don't expect to see it. Our previous experience, our expectations, interests, and biases are constantly giving rise to different perceptions. Let's take a look at this illustration. Some of you will see a young woman, and some of you will see an old woman. In various studies, it was found that younger people tended to see the younger face, while older people tended to see the older face, without any hints about what to look for. And then there's the rat man illusion. Try to identify each drawing as soon as you see it. Now, identify this one. Let's try another sequence. Again, identify each drawing as soon as you see it. Now, how about this one? In a number of studies, it was found that the first series of drawings of animals led most subjects to identify this image as a rat. But when other subjects saw the drawings of people, they tended to identify this drawing as an old man with glasses. Their prior experiences created very different ways of looking at the same distal stimulus. Sometimes, however, we have trouble perceiving things not because of our experiences or our expectations, but just the opposite. There's just too much unfamiliar information to absorb. We're taken by surprise. But surprise is what often happens to eyewitnesses. Watch this simulated bank robbery again and try to tell who did what. Who shot whom? Would you swear to it in court? Let's show the film this time in slow motion to see if you were right. The hand, the arm, even the whole body can be quicker than the eye when the brain isn't ready to do its detective work. What happens when we have no trouble seeing something, but what we see just doesn't make sense? When we encounter a visual paradox. At first glance, this is a solid wooden triangle. But it can't be a triangle because, from my perspective, it has two right angles, and that's impossible. So impossible, I want you to watch this as I slice my arm right through without breaking it. So now you know that it can't be solid either. Changing the perspective enables you to see it as it really is. We call this way of seeing an object in terms of its parts the analytic way of seeing, which conflicts with the holistic way of seeing the big picture. Either view makes sense alone, but together, they create a paradox. In this animation of a bouncing ball, the staircase appears to go up forever. This paradox also works in reverse. Although our senses put us in touch with the world around us, it's our brain, working from prior experiences, that tells us whether something is impossible or possible, organizing our perceptions and telling us what's out there and what we should think about it. And so each of us has incredibly sophisticated hardware in the form of sensory apparatus and software to process the information and make sense of it, both perfected over millions of years. Usually the two work together extremely well, but sometimes they don't. And so we can never take perception for granted, no matter how well we do it in the normal course of our lives. In our next program, we're going to look at another ability of ours that shapes the way we look at the world, and that's our ability to learn, to profit from experience. A tale of mice and men and women. Next time. I'm Philip Zimbardo.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching. For information about this and other Annenberg CPB programs,